Welcome back everyone. In part 1 we covered the foundation of my character rigging process in Moho. We broke down the character into individual parts, set up the right photo structure, and traced each element to complete the character. If you haven't seen that video, definitely check it out so you can follow along with each step in the rigging journey. Alright, so now that we got our character traced, organized, and ready to go, it's time to dive into the real action, which is rigging. In this part, we'll add the skeleton and begin binding each piece to the corresponding bone to bring it to life. Keep in mind, this isn't a step-by-step tutorial, it's more of an inside look into how I approach character rigging, what works for me, and some techniques I picked up along the way. But I like to start with the root bone, then I work my way up from the root bone to the stomach, the upper body, neck, head, then we go to the limbs. And that's what you'll be seeing me doing right here. Now once we have a full skeleton like this laid out, we have to begin attaching the artwork and the groups to the bones so that they move in correspondence with each other. Now I mainly use flexi binding and layer binding, but for the lower torso I use point binding, as you will see throughout this video. I normally flexi bind the limbs and body while layer binding the head. So in here you will see that I point bind the lower part of the torso that we created in the first video to our hip bone. So I'll point bind the lower part of it to the hip bone, while the top part of it is going to be point bind to the stomach. So what I'm doing here is grabbing the upper leg bone and point binding, not layer binding or flexi binding, but point binding all these points in that leg. You can get away with maybe layer binding or flexi binding for this process, but how I rig the character, point binding works perfectly, as you see. So here we're just changing the colors of the legs. Now we still have some point binding that we have to correct and fix. As you will see, the rig starts to come together right here. So here you can see I'm adding smooth joints for bone pairs, which will just allow the joints to bend better. You can get a rig pretty far without even relying on smart actions or smart bones just by knowing which tool to implement. By me implementing these smooth joints for bone pairs, it allows the limbs to bend better. So once we do get to adding smart bones, it will be less work on us. And that's why I say this is not a tutorial per se, this is just an overview of my workflow. Because as you see, I'm still, fine-tuning stuff, it's still working out different elements and going back and changing stuff. But the general concept and idea is pretty much the same. So right here, let's just name our bones because we're about to switch to doing our smart bones. So now the smart bones will be used to correct any error when moving the rig. I bend the joints, and if there's a problem with the joint I bend, I will go through and fix it with the smart bone. I go through each limb, the arms, the legs, the torso tilt, and just fix it like that. We continue correcting the joints and the bends in the animation with the smart bones just to make our rig a little bit more pristine. Okay, so once we've done that and set up all the smart bones, the next step I like to take typically is adding target bones and bone constraints so that our character will stay in place and bend correctly. You will see what I'm talking about. So right now we're adding the target bones, making sure to target the right bone, making the bone independent, and increasing our IK stretching. You don't necessarily have to increase the stretching for your rig, but I like to have stretchy characters. After that, we add some angle constraints to make sure we get the right type of bend at the knees. And And that wraps up part 2 of my character rigging process. We covered a lot, adding the skeleton, building the artwork, fine-tuning joints, and even using smart bones and target bones to really bring this character to life. Each of these steps help build a rig that's both flexible and durable for animation. Remember, this is just one way to approach rigging, but I hope it gave you some insight into my workflow and maybe sparked some ideas for your own projects. Thanks for sticking around and watching. If you're into animation or just curious about the process, be sure to hit that subscribe button and join me for part 3, where I'll be adding facial controls to the rig to get even more expressions and flexibility. As always, drop a comment if you have questions, feedback, or want to share your own rigging journey. See you in the next video.